Your dog is lying at your feet right now, not on the couch, not near the door, right there, pressed against your ankle, warm and still. You haven't said a word to them in an hour. You haven't offered a treat. You haven't reached down to pet them, and yet there they are. Most people look at that moment and think, my dog loves me, they want to be close to me, which is not wrong. But the explanation most people carry stops exactly there. Affection, loyalty, a social animal doing what social animals do. It sounds complete, it feels satisfying. But the science tells a completely different story. What is actually happening in that moment reaches far deeper than simple companionship. It touches neurobiology, evolutionary history spanning more than 15,000 years, and a form of emotional attunement that researchers are only now beginning to fully map. And by the time this video ends, you will understand why hugs and kisses, the gestures most people use to show love to a dog, may be among the least effective signals you ever send. Let's work through the logic together, because the simple explanation cannot account for everything you have already observed. Think about what your dog actually does when you come home. Not what you wish they did, what they actually do. They don't go to you for a hug, they move toward your face. They sniff you first, they track your scent before they make contact. They are reading you before they touch you. Now think about the times you have been upset, genuinely low, anxious, or quietly heartbroken, when you haven't changed your posture, haven't spoken, haven't done anything visibly different, and your dog came and sat close anyway, rested their head on your leg, watched your face with a kind of attention that felt like understanding. They were not responding to a hug in that moment. They were not responding to a kiss. They were responding to something you were broadcasting, something chemical, something beneath the threshold of human awareness, something your dog's sensory architecture caught with extraordinary clarity. So if the real signal isn't physical contact, if the thing your dog detects isn't the gesture you're making but something older and more precise, then what exactly does your dog feel when they feel your love? That question is what the last 2 decades of behavioral research have been working to answer. In 2015, a team at Azabu University in Japan published a study that fundamentally changed the way behavioral scientists understand the dog-human bond. The lead researcher, Takafumi Kikisui, brought pairs of dogs and their owners into a controlled laboratory environment. No commands, no training tasks, no structured activities, just owners and dogs spending time together as they normally would. The researchers then collected urine samples from both the dogs and the humans and measured levels of oxytocin across different types of interaction. What they found was remarkable. When dogs and their owners engaged in mutual gaze, simply looking into each other's eyes without any other prompting, oxytocin levels rose significantly in both species simultaneously, not just in the human, not just in the dog, in both. The dogs who initiated eye contact most frequently and held it longest showed the highest oxytocin spikes. The humans who engaged with that gaze showed the same, and critically, when the researchers ran the same experiment with wolves who had been raised from infancy by humans, wolves who were socialized, bonded to their human handlers, and comfortable with close contact, the shared oxytocin loop did not activate, only in domestic dogs. The study was published in the journal Science, and the finding it carried was not subtle. Dogs and humans have developed a shared neurochemical feedback system triggered by mutual gaze that operates in a way functionally indistinguishable from the oxytocin loop between a human mother and a newborn infant. Your dog looks at you, you look back, and both of your brains change simultaneously. That is not poetry, that is measurable biology. To understand why that matters, it helps to spend a moment on what oxytocin actually does, because it is frequently mischaracterized. Most people have heard it called the love hormone or the bonding hormone, and while those labels are not wrong, they flatten something more precise and more important. Oxytocin is a neuropeptide, a molecule that functions both as a hormone in the bloodstream and as a neurotransmitter in the brain. Its primary function is social trust regulation. When oxytocin is released, it reduces the activity of the amygdala, the region of the brain responsible for processing fear and perceived threat, and it increases activity in neural circuits associated with social approach and affiliative behavior. In plain language, oxytocin tells a nervous system that this other being is safe, that this relationship is real, that the threat response can be lowered and genuine connection can happen. It is the molecule of earned trust. In humans, sustained oxytocin elevation is associated with moments of genuine emotional intimacy, prolonged eye contact with a romantic partner, skin-to-skin contact between parent and infant, the specific feeling of being deeply known by someone who is not going anywhere. Now hold that against what the Azabu University study found. Dogs do not produce oxytocin simply in the presence of humans. They produce it through the same mechanism, mutual gaze, that governs the deepest human attachments, and no other species that has been tested shows this. Not chimpanzees, not bonobos, not wolves, only dogs. They did not inherit this loop from wolves. They did not borrow it from primates. They built it alongside us over thousands of years of shared life as a direct product of living inside our emotional environment. That is not an accident. That is evolution working in a direction almost no one anticipated. To understand how far back this goes, we need to leave the laboratory and travel across 15,000 years. In 2018, researchers analyzing ancient mitochondrial DNA from archaeological sites across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East identified a cluster of genetic mutations in early domestic dogs, mutations absent in their wolf ancestors, concentrated in genes governing social attention, stress reactivity, and cooperative behavior with other species. These changes were not random. They appeared selectively in populations that had spent the most time in proximity to human settlements, and they accelerated during exactly the period when human communities were transitioning from nomadic life to permanent settlement. The selective pressure was not for size, or speed, or hunting prowess. It was for the capacity to read human emotional states and respond to them with accuracy. One of the oldest and most evocative pieces of physical evidence for what that relationship looked like in practice comes from a burial site near the German city of Bonn-Oberkassel. In that site, dated to approximately 14,000 years before the present, archaeologists found a grave containing the remains of an adult man, an adult woman, and a dog. The dog was a young puppy. Analysis of its skeletal remains revealed that it had suffered from a severe and debilitating illness, canine distemper, in the months before its death. The disease would have left it unable to move independently, unable to feed itself, and unable to survive without sustained human care over a period the researchers estimated at several weeks at minimum. Someone fed that dog. Someone cleaned that dog. Someone kept that animal alive through weeks of suffering and then buried it alongside their dead. That is not a working animal. That is a loved one. Whatever bond was being maintained through those weeks of illness was built from the same neurochemical architecture, the same mutual gaze, the same emotional synchronization that connects your dog to you today. 15,000 years of this. The dog at your feet tonight is not a recent addition to human life. They are the oldest collaborative relationship our species has ever maintained. Now here is the finding that surprises almost everyone, because it contradicts the most instinctive thing people do when they want to show love to a dog. Researchers affiliated with the psychology department at the University of British Columbia conducted a large-scale behavioral analysis, examining how dogs respond to different types of human physical contact. The team reviewed thousands of publicly available photographs of people hugging dogs and trained behavioral analysts, who were not informed of the study's hypothesis, evaluated each image independently for established signs of canine stress. The signs they looked for are well documented in the behavioral literature: the whale eye, where the white of the eye becomes visible at the edge of the lid, a turned or averted head, a lowered or flattened ear, a tightened or closed mouth, and displacement behaviors like yawning during restraint. These are not signs of aggression. They are not signs that the dog dislikes you. They are signs of politely managed discomfort. In more than 80% of the images reviewed, at least one of these stress indicators was clearly present. The dogs were tolerating the hug. Many of them were leaning into it, but their bodies were broadcasting something their owners were not seeing. The explanation lies in evolutionary biology. Dogs evolved as cursorial animals, animals built to run, whose primary defense response to threat is flight, not freeze and not fight. Physical restraint, even gentle restraint, even restraint from the person they love and trust most in the world, engages the neural architecture of being unable to escape. The body reads it as a mild threat before the conscious mind can reassure it otherwise. Your hug sends love. Their nervous system receives something more complicated. This does not mean that no dog learns to enjoy close physical contact. Many absolutely do, and individual variation is real and significant, but the embrace is not the primary channel. It is not the native frequency. And that raises the question that everything in this video has been building toward. If the hug is not the most powerful signal you can send, what is? And it turns out the answer has been right in front of us the whole time, at a scale most people never expected. The deepest evidence for how dogs actually receive love comes from work done over nearly 3 decades at the Family Dog Project at Eötvös-Loránd University in Budapest, one of the longest-running and most comprehensive research programs ever devoted to understanding canine cognition and the dog-human relationship. The project, founded by Adam Miklosi, has produced findings across dozens of studies examining how dogs process human emotional signals in real time. What the team established across multiple experimental paradigms is that dogs use a simultaneous multi-channel system to read human emotional state, integrating scent, vocal tone, facial expression, body posture, and microbehavioral cues all at once, not sequentially. In one well-known series of experiments, the researchers presented dogs with images of human faces on screens, stripped of any scent or vocal cue, purely visual, and found that dogs reliably distinguished between expressions of positive and negative human emotion and adjusted their own behavior accordingly. That alone is extraordinary. But the deepest finding, the one that almost nobody who writes or talks about dogs ever discusses, came from a separate series of studies examining what the Budapest team called long-term emotional contagion. The experiments tracked cortisol levels in both dogs and their owners over extended periods, ranging from several weeks to several months. What they found was this: dogs do not simply detect your emotional state in the moment and respond to it. They gradually entrain to it. When an owner lives with sustained elevated stress, not a single difficult day but chronic, ongoing anxiety, the dog's baseline cortisol levels begin rising in parallel over the following days and weeks, eventually mirroring the owner's biochemical state with striking fidelity. The dog did not choose to take on that stress. Their physiology absorbed it automatically, the way a tuning fork begins to vibrate when the frequency it is tuned to passes through the air nearby, and the effect runs equally powerfully in the opposite direction. Dogs in households where the owner maintains a calm, stable, low-stress emotional baseline show consistently lower long-term cortisol levels, stronger immune markers, and fewer behavioral indicators of chronic stress than dogs in high-stress households, independent of exercise, diet, breed, or individual genetics. What this means, what it actually means for the dog lying at your feet tonight, is that the most profound expression of love you can offer them is not a gesture you make. It is a state you inhabit. It is the sustained daily experience of being in a calm, safe, emotionally regulated presence. Your nervous system, speaking quietly and continuously to theirs across every hour you share, is the signal they were built to receive. That is the love they feel most deeply, not the hug, not the kiss. You. There is one more thing that matters here, and it is more practical and more urgent than anything else in this video. Dogs are not static. The systems we have been describing, the oxytocin feedback loop, the cortisol synchronization, the multi-channel emotional reading, these systems can degrade, and when they do, the dog signals it. If your dog has recently started avoiding eye contact, not occasionally, not in a specific stressful context, but consistently and as a new pattern, that is worth taking seriously. If a dog who used to follow you between rooms has started staying behind more frequently, choosing distance where they once chose proximity, with no obvious external cause for the shift, that behavioral change means something. Research published by the American Veterinary Medical Association has documented that behavioral withdrawal, reduced social approach toward the primary owner, avoidance of mutual gaze, decreased responsiveness to the owner's voice and movement patterns, is among the earliest and most diagnostically reliable indicators of canine depression, unmanaged chronic pain, and early-stage canine cognitive dysfunction syndrome, which is the clinical equivalent of Alzheimer's disease in the dog brain. In a reviewed clinical sample of over 500 dogs referred to veterinary behavioral clinics across the United States, withdrawal from the primary owner bond was present in more than 70% of cases in which an underlying physical or neurological condition was subsequently confirmed. Your dog cannot say, "Something feels wrong inside my body." They cannot tell you the world is becoming confusing, or that something aches when they move, or that they feel less like themselves than they used to. What they can do, what they are doing, every single day, in every interaction, is broadcast. Behavior is the only language they have access to. A change in how they seek you, how they look at you, how close they choose to be, that is communication. It deserves your attention. Go back to that moment, your dog lying at your feet, the room quiet, nothing being offered, nothing being asked, and there they are. You know now what is actually happening. Their olfactory system is reading your emotional signature in real time. Your cortisol baseline is quietly shaping theirs, hour by hour. If you looked down right now and held their gaze for just 10 seconds, oxytocin would rise in both of you simultaneously. That moment, ordinary, unremarkable, easy to scroll past, is the living continuation of a bond that was being actively built before the first human city, before the first written language, before most of what we call civilization had begun, and it is being rebuilt, quietly and precisely, every time you are simply fully present with them. If this changed the way you see what passes between you and your dog, subscribe and leave a comment below. Here is what I genuinely want to know. Does your dog ever make eye contact with you for no obvious reason, not because you called them, not because there is food nearby, just a quiet, unhurried look from across the room? Tell me what that moment feels like when it happens, and how often it does. The variation across individual dogs in how they use that gaze is something researchers are still actively mapping, and what you have observed matters more than you might think. Next time, we are looking at why some dogs seem to know when you are about to arrive home, sometimes many minutes before you reach the door. And the science behind that ability is far more precise and far stranger than almost anyone expects.